Some of you might dual boot Linux and Windows for your PC gaming, but some people dual boot Android and Android. If you're at all familiar with Samsung phones, you know this is not what it looks like, and it's not just a theme. And it turns out you can do that on almost any modern phone, and kind of without root. And to set expectations, since I will be showing you how to do this, just know that you probably should not be doing this to your actual phone and expecting it to just work flawlessly forever. It's cool and it works and it has utility beyond just being like, wow, look, I'm in this OS and then I reboot and I'm in this OS. But as we'll get to later, it did cause me one boot loop followed by a factory reset, and this feature is really not intended to be used by end users. If I get some of the terminology or individual steps wrong during this, that's as expected. Do not use me if you're planning on doing this as your primary resource, because I'm not a developer in this way. I just tried some things and evidently it worked. As you saw earlier, this is not One UI. I have succeeded, so technically I know how to do it, but I'm not the expert on this. So don't complain to me if it goes wrong, or congratulate me if it's amazing, because I'm just telling you about work that other people have done. But with that said, the first thing we're going to cover is, why would you even want to dual boot on a phone? And the answer, the first thing that comes to mind, and the first thing I see mentioned a lot online, is what if you're an app developer and you want to make sure that your app will work on phones that are very minimal. They might not have Google services, they might not have any special vendor proprietary things, but your phone does have those things. You can keep your install as it is, have everything working, but also have this super minimal extra installation that you can put your own app onto and mess with as much as you'd like, and keep them separated. Alternately, what if you are interested in switching to a custom ROM, but you just want to be able to dip your toes in? Again, the benefit here is keeping your original OS separate, but you can still mess with this one. Plus, what if you aren't just interested in dipping your toes in, you already know you want to switch, but there are a few apps that require Google services or whatever that you're not going to be able to have here. That way you can keep using any weird, awkward proprietary apps that are doing some checks about what your OS is like. Or maybe it's none of those reasons, you actually don't even want to be dual booting, you just want to be in that one OS, but you don't want to flash a custom recovery environment. So if you were to do this, what would you actually be doing differently? Well, a normal Android ROM contains a bunch of vendor-specific software. You know, a custom kernel, special drivers, the things to talk to the parts that make your phone different from any other phone. Because of that, to my knowledge and limited but very silly past experience, you are not just gonna willy-nilly be able to shove any random ROM onto any random phone. These are complete setups for complete individual devices. Recently-ish, Google has introduced Project Treble, and I really do mean ish, it's not that recent, but yeah. Project Treble aims to better separate these vendor-specific parts of Android and Android that lives on top. With that, it should be much easier to keep the vendor bits up to date in their own way, and update Android on top of them in their own way, and if you were to have a phone that already has all of its vendor-specific software, you could just swap out that Android that's on top of it, and every device-specific feature should keep working. Android on top just asks for the camera, and the bit below knows how to talk to that device's camera, and it works. Those separated top Android bits are called generic system images, and when combined with the dynamic system update functionality, we can just swap those, and we can also have multiple at once and switch between them when restarting. That's what the dual booting is, and it goes beyond, most of the time, just being able to boot, and into really having like a mostly functional phone with fingerprint sensors and audio and displays and cameras like I mentioned in the example before. And that's all using officially Android sanctioned methods rather than some hacky workaround, even if the official way is still kind of hacky. But doesn't that just sound too good to be true? If GSIs are this magic thing where we can completely separate the lower level parts of the specific phone we've got from the Android running on top of it, why does anyone still make custom ROMs for specific devices? Are they stupid? No, because as magic as they might sound, compatibility issues can still pop up. Maybe the kernel that you've got and the drivers are all there for your phone, but you're just missing some user-level software to actually interact with it. Like, if your phone had triggers on the back of it, you'd need a way to actually map those into games. Maybe there's some special vendor software for that. Or if your phone had some special image processing hardware, yeah, your phone might be able to talk to it, but you need a special app specifically designed to take advantage of that, so any generic image isn't going to come with that. Beyond that, maybe there's just some weird incompatibility that means, no, it should support drivers for everything on your phone, but it just doesn't. And I've only been discussing the issues with GSIs specifically. Once you add the fact that you're using the dynamic system update stuff to switch them out and have two partitions on your phone to dual boot them, you're adding a whole extra level of complexity. And it is part of base Android. It should be well maintained and it should just work, but it's just factual that your setup, dual booting, will be more complex than someone who isn't dual booting, and there is more to go wrong. If you really don't want your phone to just stop working, and I really don't, you might not be able to stick with it just for those reasons. The easiest example of something you might not think about when it comes to the complexity of having two installs is that whenever I installed a new GSI, my main OS install complained about my fingerprint data now being corrupt. I believe that my data was not somehow being corrupted, because if there was actual data corruption, if somehow making those partitions was ruining data on my phone, what are the chances that all of my app data and all of my pictures and everything else was fine? It was just my fingerprint data consistently every time. So realistically, it's just that this main OS doesn't really see anything wrong with the fingerprint data, but it saw that something with the system changed, and that's scary, so we shouldn't trust any security information that was given to us in the past, because maybe an attacker put it there. I'm honestly not sure, but that's just a weird thing that popped up. But if all of that didn't dissuade you, and it might reasonably not have, you're probably now wondering, how do you do it? And although if I revisit this in the future, I will probably just do it with ADB commands, which you can do too if you're interested, there's a free and open source app that tries to make it really easy called DSU Sideloader. You can get it from F-Droid, and all you need to do is give it a GSI image, tell it how much storage you want to have on that separate partition, and tell it to go. The problem is, telling it to go requires higher permissions than you'd normally have. If you have a rooted phone, you can just give it permission because you have root, but if you don't, you can either run an ADB command directly to give it permission, or you can use Shizuku, which is, as far as I understand it, like root light. You give Shizuku special access through ADB once, and then it can further divvy out special permissions to apps because it was given them. For whatever reason, using ADB directly didn't work for me, but Shizuku mode did. Whenever you reinstall a different GSI, it's going to wipe any of the user data saved, so it's persistent between reboots, but even if you just accidentally, with the button on the notification, decide to dismiss that GSI install, all your user data there will be gone, so be very careful about backing up what's on there if you want to use it persistently. As I mentioned, the fact that you might just dismiss it with the button that's in your notifications, once you have something installed, there will be a persistent notification there that lets you reboot into your dynamic system update GSI, or dismiss it, wipe that install, and you can start fresh or just leave it gone. Once you're in that other environment, you will still have that notification. Since it's not part of the DSU Loader app, that's why you can do this all through ADB separately, these are things built into Android. But this time, it will be giving you the option to boot back into your phone's normal OS. If you want to know whether your phone actually supports everything that I'm talking about, you can download the Treble Info app, another free and open source app, that will give you relevant information, and that, combined with a GitHub page that it links to and the README for DSU Loader, should give you all the information you need to know about whether you can do this to your phone. But regardless of whether you can, whether you should is down to your own risk tolerance. As I have kept saying, data loss might happen, it might not, it might happen for no apparent reason, as it happened to me. A warning, personally, I had just backed my phone up before this, so I was fine. However, for whatever reason, I honestly have completely forgotten if there was anything I did differently before this. I went to reboot into the GSI image rather than the regular one, and my phone kept boot looping. It wasn't getting stuck at the GSI and then rebooting and going back into the normal mode. It was just stuck there, so I ended up factory resetting resetting it. Issues might happen, they might not be your fault, but they might still happen, so beware of that. As far as compatibility goes with all the different GSI images available, my Samsung phone was nearly okay. It was okay on the surface with Android 14, just AOSP, fully open source, but my displays were stuck at 60 Hz. I had no stylus support, no S Pen, and the fingerprint sensor was just not working, and the options were hidden in the settings, but I could search for them, but then when I pressed on them, the settings app just crashed. Leaf OS worked, but with pretty much the same limitations as AOSP, which is a shame because it looks like a really promising project that I would love to use if it fully worked. The Pixel Experience 12 and Iode OS just didn't work for me. They both got stuck on their boot logos, though there was no data loss involved there. I just held the power button and it booted back into my normal OS. And the most promising one of these was Andy Yan's personal builds of Lineage OS, where every single thing worked except for some display issues. There were even smaller display issues, but those were solvable. Like, no menu was in my regular display settings to make things 120 Hz rather than 60. However, there was an extra menu in settings specifically for weird and wacky fixes you might want to apply, and one of them was force a refresh rate, and then I could just pick 120. So, am I going to be sticking with it? As you can probably tell, no, but that's not because of a lack of promise. I'm sure that if I got in contact with the developers and started putting in some code myself, I could get this to fully work with lots of effort. But given the awkwardness involved and the fact that it's already failed on me once, whether it was me doing something wrong or just a bug, I think I would much rather have just a regular custom ROM or flash a regular GSI and have it be the only booted thing, no weird extra partitions. Why not just do one of the things that I literally just listed? Well, because my phone still isn't fully supported by custom ROMs, and that's likely either going to change in the far future or never. Custom ROMs are getting less popular, not more. And although I want more, I want to be using a custom ROM, I also have to accept that it's probably not reasonable for me to be making my own version of Android for my own phone when I have other things to do and I need to make sure my phone will work. There's also the fact that if my phone were to be supported, but by some random little project, ideally I would like it to just be a set of patches that I could compare to AOSP. I can trust AOSP and review a patch set on top of that and then build it myself, but I don't want a pre-built OS coming from some random person that's like their own fun version of Android, even if it did support my phone. But despite that, please don't have your takeaway be Isaac thinks custom ROMs are rubbish and not worth the time, and also he thinks all of the things that he did for this video were a waste of time, because that's not true. Please have your takeaway be, wow, GSIs are interesting, I can probably do this on my phone. It won't be Isaac's fault if I break my phone, but realistically they'll be fine, and it lets me do a bunch more messing, and maybe I can get into custom ROMs that way, without the bigger step of actually fully flashing a new ROM without an instant way to go back to the old one. I only say all of that because my opinions on custom ROMs have been misunderstood in the past. I made a video about Graphene OS a while ago, which I'm going to put on the end screen for this video if you'd like to watch it, and in it I mentioned a bunch of the issues that come with a custom ROM that's maybe more privacy oriented, or just a custom ROM in general. The fact that Google services may not be the same, it's mainly actually that, but special features that the device had when you bought it may not be there in the custom ROMs, and people took that to mean, oh, well, he sees those as definitely negative. Why are you even bothering covering the ROM? It's obviously this ROM wasn't made for you if you care about those things. I was just trying to cover the fact that they're not there. I loved it and I used it and it's great. And I think this is really interesting. I just want to make sure that you understand also the issues that I had with it. There's also the fact that how customized your Android is not binary. It's not stock or a fully custom ROM. You can do what I do. I am going to be relocking my bootloader and going back to Samsung One UI, as much as that pains me. But I remove a ton of Samsung packages, the fact that the phone comes with Facebook installed, a bunch of really awkward tracking things. I replace all of the system apps with open source ones wherever I possibly can. My phone is very different when I'm done with the stock OS than the original stock OS was. And maybe if you coming out of this video decide that this awkward dual boot setup isn't for you, maybe it will have at least sparked you to think about some problems that your phone's stock OS had and you could solve them in some other way. way. Custom ROMs are obviously not dead, but with their decline in popularity, recognize as well that you can still customize your stock OS a lot. You could still root it and all the things like that. Whether you should is up to you, but you can still customize stuff without a custom ROM, and there will always be benefits and drawbacks. Despite all of the issues I mentioned, hopefully you can tell how exciting this has been to play with for me, even if it has meant I've gone a few days where my phone has been in an awkward state, and I've actually missed a few phone calls because of it. But at least you can't miss a call from people who don't have your phone number, and a list of people who don't have my phone number but do support me on Patreon, 2 new members, Fluffy Meowl and Jack, who just joined, and all of my past members, that's Russell Willis, Ducky, Pytech, and PT1997. I really appreciate all of it. Thank you. And hopefully you've enjoyed this week's video. Subscribe if you'd like to. You can talk about technology in the Discord server below, and I'll see you next week.